Think about the opportunities you've almost taken. The job you wanted to apply for, but convinced yourself you weren't qualified enough to pursue. The idea you kept to yourself because you feared it wasn't good enough. The conversation you replayed for days afterward, wishing you had spoken with more confidence. The relationship you never pursued, the promotion you never requested, the dream you quietly postponed until you felt ready. Now imagine how different your life might look if self-doubt had never made those decisions for you. For millions of people, the greatest obstacle to success isn't a lack of intelligence, talent, or opportunity. It's the quiet voice that constantly asks, "What if I'm not good enough?" That voice rarely shouts. Instead, it whispers just loudly enough to keep you from raising your hand, sharing your ideas, taking healthy risks, or believing you're capable of more than you've already achieved. Many people assume confidence is something you're either born with or without. They look at successful leaders, athletes, entrepreneurs, and performers and conclude that confidence is simply part of their personality. But science tells a very different story. Confidence is not a gift reserved for a fortunate few. It is not the absence of fear. It is not arrogance, loudness, or pretending to know everything. And it certainly isn't about becoming the most extroverted person in the room. True confidence is something much deeper. It is the quiet belief that you can handle challenges, recover from setbacks, and continue growing even when outcomes remain uncertain. It is built through the way your brain learns, the habits you practice, the stories you tell yourself, and the identity you strengthen through repeated action. Throughout this audiobook, you'll explore the fascinating science behind confidence, from neuroscience and behavioral psychology to emotional resilience and identity formation. You'll discover why self-doubt feels so convincing, how fear influences your decisions, why action creates confidence more effectively than positive thinking alone, and how small daily behaviors gradually rewire the brain for greater self-belief. Along the way, you'll meet relatable individuals whose journeys reveal that lasting confidence isn't created in extraordinary moments. It's built through ordinary choices repeated with intention. By the end of this audiobook, your goal won't be to eliminate fear or become someone you're not. Instead, you'll become the kind of person who acts despite uncertainty, trusts yourself through challenges, and continues moving forward even when confidence feels incomplete. Because confidence isn't something you wait to feel. It's something you build, one courageous decision at a time. And that journey begins now. Chapter 1. Confidence is built, not born. Emma stared at her computer screen long after finishing the final design. She had spent days creating a brand identity for a new client. Every color had been carefully chosen, every detail had been refined. Before sending the files, she checked everything one last time, then again, and again. Her finger hovered over the send button. Maybe the typography isn't strong enough. Perhaps they'll think it's too simple. What if they realize I'm not actually as good as they think I am? Nearly 30 minutes passed before she finally sent the email. The next morning, the client's response arrived. "This is exactly what we were hoping for. Outstanding work. Thank you." Emma smiled for a moment. Then another thought appeared. They're probably just being polite. Despite years of experience, a growing portfolio, and consistently happy clients, she still struggled to believe in her own abilities. If this sounds familiar, you're in good company. Many of the most capable people quietly wrestle with self-doubt. They receive compliments but dismiss them. They achieve meaningful goals, yet attribute their success to luck, timing, or other people's generosity. From the outside, they appear confident. Inside, they constantly wonder when everyone else will realize they aren't as capable as they seem. This raises an important question. If confidence grows through success, why do so many successful people still feel uncertain? The answer begins with challenging one of the most common myths about confidence. Many people believe confidence is something you're born with. They imagine that certain children naturally grow into fearless adults, while everyone else spends life trying to catch up. This belief is comforting because it offers a simple explanation. It is also profoundly inaccurate. No one enters the world believing they are capable of public speaking, leading a company, raising a family, or overcoming life's greatest challenges. A newborn has no concept of confidence. Children develop it gradually, one experience at a time, one challenge at a time, one success and one failure at a time. Confidence is not an inherited personality trait. It is a psychological skill that develops through experience. One of the most influential psychologists to explore this idea was Albert Bandura. He introduced the concept of self-efficacy, which refers to your belief in your ability to succeed in specific situations. Notice the difference between confidence and self-efficacy. General confidence is the feeling that you can handle life. Self-efficacy is the belief that you can successfully complete a particular task. A person may feel highly confident giving presentations, but completely uncertain about learning a new language. Another may feel comfortable managing finances while feeling nervous about meeting new people. Confidence is not one fixed quality. It is built through repeated evidence that you can face challenges, learn, adapt, and improve. This explains why experience matters so much. Each time you successfully solve a problem, your brain quietly updates its expectations. I've handled something like this before. I can probably handle it again. Those experiences accumulate. Eventually, they become the foundation of genuine confidence. This process is made possible through one of the brain's most remarkable abilities, neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reorganize itself throughout your life. Every experience creates or strengthens neural connections. Every skill you practice becomes easier with repetition. The brain is constantly adapting to what you repeatedly do. If you regularly avoid difficult situations, your brain becomes more efficient at avoidance. If you repeatedly face challenges despite discomfort, your brain becomes more capable of handling them. In other words, your brain is always learning. The question is what you're teaching it. Emma had unknowingly spent years teaching her brain something unhelpful. Every compliment was questioned. Every success was minimized. Every mistake was magnified. Her brain collected evidence supporting one story. I'm probably not good enough. The remarkable thing was that the evidence itself wasn't the problem. Her interpretation was. This is where another powerful psychological principle becomes important: the growth mindset. People with a fixed mindset believe their abilities are largely permanent. They see talent as something people either possess or lack. Failure feels threatening because it appears to reveal permanent limitations. People with a growth mindset view abilities differently. They believe skills improve through effort, learning, feedback, and practice. Mistakes become information rather than identity. Challenges become opportunities instead of threats. Imagine two people learning the same difficult skill. The first struggles and concludes, "I'm just not naturally good at this." The second struggles and thinks, "I'm not good at this yet." One word changes the entire future. Yet. That small word transforms failure from a conclusion into a stage of growth. Emma slowly began adopting this perspective. Instead of asking, "Am I talented enough?" she started asking, "What can I improve with practice?" Instead of measuring herself against impossible standards, she began measuring herself against her previous version. Her goal shifted from proving herself to improving herself. The emotional difference was enormous. She no longer expected every project to be perfect. She expected every project to teach her something. That expectation quietly reduced the pressure she had carried for years. Another common myth about confidence is that confident people never experience fear. Nothing could be further from the truth. Fear is a natural response to uncertainty. Confident people feel it too. The difference is not emotional, it is behavioral. They have learned through repeated experience that fear does not automatically predict failure. They trust themselves to respond even when they feel uncomfortable. Confidence is not the absence of self-doubt. It is the willingness to continue despite it. Think back to your own life. There are skills you perform today without much hesitation. Perhaps driving, cooking, using technology, holding conversations. There was probably a time when those same activities felt unfamiliar and intimidating. You did not become confident by waiting until fear disappeared. You became confident by practicing until your brain recognized the activity as familiar. Confidence followed experience, not the other way around. Emma gradually noticed this happening in her own work. She stopped endlessly seeking reassurance before submitting designs. She accepted that every creative project involved some uncertainty. When constructive criticism arrived, she no longer interpreted it as proof of inadequacy. She treated it as guidance for improvement. Months later, something surprising happened. She wasn't thinking about confidence nearly as often. She was simply doing the work. That is often how real confidence develops. It grows quietly in the background while your attention remains focused on learning rather than proving yourself. This is the hidden truth about confidence. It is not something a lucky few are born with. It is something ordinary people build through extraordinary consistency. Every challenge you face, every mistake you survive, every new skill you practice, each one becomes another piece of evidence that you are more capable than your doubts suggest. Confidence is not a personality trait, it is a learned psychological skill, and if it can be learned, it can continue growing for the rest of your life. But that realization naturally leads to another question. If confidence can be built through experience, why do so many intelligent, talented, and capable people still struggle to believe in themselves? Chapter 2. The Hidden Origins of Self-Doubt. Daniel could remember the feeling long before he could explain it. As a child, he loved asking questions, trying new things, and imagining impossible ideas. When he built something, he proudly showed it to the adults around him. When he drew pictures, he didn't worry about whether they were perfect. Like most children, he believed that learning was supposed to include mistakes. Slowly, that began to change. One afternoon, he brought home a school test with a score of 94%. He was proud. His parents smiled, but their first question was, what happened to the other 6%? The comment wasn't intended to hurt him. They wanted him to reach his full potential. Teachers often corrected mistakes more than they celebrated progress. Family members compared grades with other children. Success was expected. Mistakes received the most attention. Year after year, Daniel absorbed an invisible lesson. Being good wasn't enough. Only being perfect felt safe. By the time he reached adulthood, he rarely volunteered for unfamiliar opportunities. He avoided situations where he might appear inexperienced. He prepared endlessly before taking action, believing that one mistake could expose him as incapable. He thought he lacked confidence. In reality, he had learned something much deeper. He had learned to doubt himself. Most people assume self-doubt begins in adulthood after experiencing rejection, failure, or disappointment. Often it begins much earlier. Long before you consciously understand yourself, your brain is quietly collecting information about who you are, what the world is like, and how safe it is to make mistakes. Children are extraordinary observers. They may not fully understand the words adults use, but they notice patterns. They notice what earns praise. They notice what invites criticism. They notice which emotions seem acceptable and which seem dangerous. These repeated experiences gradually become what psychologists call core beliefs. Core beliefs are the deeply held assumptions you develop about yourself, other people, and the world. Unlike passing thoughts, core beliefs often operate below conscious awareness. They quietly answer questions such as, am I capable? Am I worthy? Is it safe to fail? Do I have to earn approval? Once these beliefs are established, they begin influencing almost every decision that follows. Someone who develops the belief, I'm capable of learning, approaches challenges differently from someone who believes, if I fail, it means I'm not good enough. The situations may be identical. The interpretations are completely different. Daniel's core belief was simple. Mistakes equal failure. That belief affected everything. He didn't apply for promotions because he feared rejection. He postponed learning new skills because being a beginner felt embarrassing. Imagine trying to open a locked door several times without success. Eventually, you may stop trying altogether. Now imagine someone quietly unlocks the door while you're not looking. If you've already concluded there's no point, you may never discover that the door is now open. This happens psychologically as well. Someone who experiences repeated criticism may stop sharing ideas. Someone repeatedly told they aren't talented may stop trying to improve. Someone who grows up believing mistakes are unacceptable may avoid challenges where growth is actually possible. The limitation is no longer external, it becomes internal. Daniel wasn't being held back by his circumstances anymore. He was being held back by expectations formed years earlier. The remarkable thing about the human mind is that once a belief takes root, it begins searching for evidence that confirms it. This tendency is strengthened by another powerful psychological force, negativity bias. As you learned earlier in this audiobook, the brain naturally pays more attention to negative experiences than positive ones. But when negativity bias combines with limiting core beliefs, something even more powerful happens. Imagine Daniel receives 10 pieces of feedback after giving a presentation. 9 people compliment his work. 1 person suggests a small improvement. Which comment does he remember on the drive home? The criticism, not because it is more important, because his existing belief quietly tells his brain, see, this proves you're not good enough. The brain eagerly collects evidence that supports its existing story. Compliments are dismissed. Mistakes become unforgettable. Success feels temporary. Failure feels permanent. This explains why reassurance rarely solves chronic self-doubt. If the underlying belief remains unchanged, new evidence is filtered through the same old story. Someone can tell Daniel he is talented 100 times. If he fundamentally believes, I only have value when I'm perfect, those compliments struggle to take root. The old belief quietly rejects them. Understanding this is incredibly important. Self-doubt is not always the result of today's reality. Often, it is yesterday's conditioning continuing to shape today's decisions. The encouraging news is that beliefs are learned. Anything learned can be questioned. Daniel's transformation began with one surprisingly simple exercise. Whenever he noticed himself hesitating, he wrote down the thought stopping him. I'll probably fail. I'm not experienced enough. Other people are naturally better than I am. Then he asked himself another question. Who taught me to believe this? Sometimes the answer was obvious. A teacher, a parent, an early experience. Other times the belief had developed gradually over years of repeated messages. The important discovery wasn't assigning blame. It was recognizing that these beliefs had an origin. And if they had an origin, they were not permanent truths. Slowly, Daniel began replacing old conclusions with healthier ones. Mistakes became evidence of learning rather than proof of inadequacy. Challenges became opportunities instead of threats. Progress became more important than perfection. His circumstances had not changed. His interpretation had. That shift opened doors he had unknowingly kept closed for years. This is the first great step toward lasting confidence. Not pretending self-doubt doesn't exist, understanding where it came from, because once you recognize that your inner critic was learned rather than inherited, you stop treating it as absolute truth. You begin treating it as an old story that no longer deserves complete authority over your life. But understanding the origins of self-doubt is only the beginning. Old beliefs have a remarkable ability to survive. To truly build confidence, you must also understand how your brain keeps those beliefs alive every single day. Chapter 3. Your brain is predicting your future. Ryan had been with his company for nearly 6 years. He was dependable, thoughtful, and highly respected by his colleagues. Whenever a difficult project appeared, people trusted him to solve problems calmly and efficiently. His manager frequently praised his work and encouraged him to take on greater responsibility. Then, one afternoon, an unexpected opportunity arrived. A leadership position had opened within the department. Several co-workers immediately encouraged Ryan to apply. "You'd be great at it," one of them said. His manager agreed. "I think you're ready." Ryan smiled politely. Then, almost automatically, another voice appeared inside his mind. "I'm not leadership material." He remembered a presentation years earlier where he had become nervous and forgotten part of what he wanted to say. He remembered leading a small university project that hadn't gone well. He remembered one difficult conversation with a former co-worker that left him questioning whether he was good at guiding other people. Within minutes, his decision was made. He didn't apply. Nothing in his present suggested he would fail. His past quietly convinced him that he already had. If you've ever avoided an opportunity because of something that happened years ago, you've experienced one of the brain's most remarkable psychological processes. Your brain is constantly making predictions. Many people imagine the brain as something that simply reacts to the world. Modern neuroscience suggests something far more fascinating. Your brain is continuously predicting the world before it happens. Rather than waiting for reality to unfold, it creates expectations based on previous experiences, then compares those expectations with what actually occurs. This process is known as predictive processing. Every day your brain asks countless silent questions. What usually happens here? What should I expect? How should I respond? These predictions allow you to move through life efficiently. You don't have to relearn how to drive every morning. You don't consciously calculate every step while walking. Your brain relies on previous experience to guide present behavior. Most of the time, this system works beautifully. The challenge arises when past emotional experiences begin predicting your future in ways that no longer reflect reality. If you've been rejected before, your brain predicts rejection again. If you've failed publicly once, your brain expects failure to repeat. If you were criticized as a child, your brain begins anticipating criticism even in supportive environments. The prediction feels like truth. Often, it is simply memory disguised as certainty. Ryan wasn't evaluating the leadership opportunity objectively. His brain had already decided what would happen. It wasn't asking, "Can I learn to lead?" It was asking, "How can I avoid failing again?" Notice the difference. One question creates possibility. The other creates avoidance. This is where cognitive biases quietly shape our lives. A cognitive bias is a predictable pattern of thinking that influences how we interpret information. These biases are not signs of low intelligence. In fact, every human brain relies on them. They help us make quick decisions without analyzing every situation from the beginning. The problem is that mental shortcuts are not always accurate. Imagine someone who has one unpleasant experience with public speaking. Their brain may begin assuming public speaking is dangerous. The next presentation feels more threatening. Their anxiety increases. Performance becomes more difficult. The poor experience appears to confirm the original belief. The cycle strengthens itself. One of the most powerful biases involved in confidence is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the brain's tendency to notice, remember, and interpret information in ways that support existing beliefs. If Ryan believes, "I'm not a leader," his brain naturally begins collecting evidence that agrees. Every awkward conversation becomes proof. Every small mistake feels significant. Every success receives far less attention. Compliments are dismissed. Constructive feedback becomes unforgettable. Even when people encourage him to apply for leadership roles, he quietly assumes they don't know him well enough to see his shortcomings. His brain isn't trying to deceive him. It's trying to remain consistent with the story it already believes. This is one reason self-doubt can feel so convincing. The evidence appears overwhelming, but much of that evidence has been carefully filtered. The brain highlights information supporting its expectations while overlooking information that challenges them. Fortunately, expectations can change. This is where neural pathways become important. Every repeated thought strengthens certain connections in the brain. Imagine walking across an open field. The first journey requires effort because there is no path. Walk the same route every day and eventually a visible trail appears. Thoughts work much the same way. The more frequently you think, "I'm not good enough," the more familiar that pathway becomes. Eventually, the thought appears almost automatically, not because it is true, because it has been practiced. The encouraging news is that the opposite process is also possible. New pathways can be built, not through pretending, not through empty positive affirmations, but through repeated experiences that gradually teach the brain something different. Ryan's manager noticed he hadn't applied for the leadership position. Instead of criticizing him, she invited him to lead a much smaller project involving only 3 people. Ryan hesitated. Everything inside him predicted failure. He accepted anyway. The first meeting wasn't perfect. He occasionally lost his train of thought. He asked for advice more often than he expected. But something remarkable happened. The project moved forward. His teammates appreciated his organization. Problems were solved. Deadlines were met. Nothing extraordinary occurred, yet something inside Ryan quietly changed. His brain had received new evidence. The old prediction, "I can't lead," no longer matched reality. One experience didn't erase years of self-doubt, but it created a small crack in the old belief. The following month, he led another project, then another. Each experience strengthened a different pathway. Maybe I can learn this. Notice what happened. Confidence did not appear before action. Action changed the brain's predictions. The future stopped looking identical to the past because Ryan was creating new experiences for his brain to learn from. This is one of the most hopeful discoveries in psychology. Your past influences your expectations. It does not imprison your future. Every time you try something new, you give your brain fresh evidence. Every time you continue after a mistake, you weaken an old prediction. Every time you act despite self-doubt, you remind your nervous system that yesterday does not have to become tomorrow. Your history shapes you. It does not sentence you. The brain is constantly updating itself. The question is whether you are giving it new experiences to update from. Ryan eventually looked back at the leadership role he once avoided and realized something profound. His greatest limitation had never been a lack of ability. It had been believing the past already knew the future. Once that belief changed, so did his behavior. And once his behavior changed, so did his life. But predictions alone don't determine what you do. Even when the brain begins expecting success, another powerful force still influences every meaningful decision. That force is fear. Because predictions shape behavior, but fear determines whether you act. Chapter 4. Why Fear Shrinks Your Potential. Sophia received the email on a Tuesday morning. A senior position had opened within her company, and her manager had personally encouraged her to apply. The role came with greater responsibility, a higher salary, and the opportunity to lead projects she had dreamed about for years. Everyone around her seemed excited. "You'd be perfect for this," her co-worker said. "You've already been doing half the work anyway," another added. Sophia thanked them. Then she quietly closed the email. By lunchtime, her mind had already built a convincing case against applying. "I'm not experienced enough. Someone else will be more qualified. If I get the job, people will expect too much from me. What if I fail?" By the end of the day, she had made her decision. She would stay exactly where she was. It felt safe. It also felt disappointing. Years later, she would realize something important. She hadn't been rejected. She had rejected herself before life even had the chance to answer. This is one of fear's greatest tricks. It doesn't always scream. Often it whispers. It disguises itself as logic, as preparation, as responsibility. It convinces you that avoiding risk is the smartest choice, when in reality it is quietly shrinking your world. Many people assume fear is proof that they are not ready, but fear tells a very different story. More often than not, fear appears precisely because something matters. It appears when you're about to grow beyond what feels familiar. Think back to the first time you drove a car, spoke in front of a group, started a new job, or met someone who later became important in your life. Your heart probably raced. Your hands may have felt tense. Your thoughts may have questioned whether you could handle it. None of those reactions meant you were incapable. They meant your brain had entered unfamiliar territory. At the center of this experience is a remarkable structure deep inside the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala acts like an early warning system. Its primary responsibility is not happiness, success, or confidence. Its job is survival. Whenever it detects something unfamiliar or potentially threatening, it sends signals throughout your body almost instantly. Your heart beats faster, your muscles tighten, your breathing changes, your attention narrows. Long before your logical mind has fully evaluated the situation, your nervous system is already preparing for action. This response evolved for a very good reason. Thousands of years ago, rapid reactions helped our ancestors survive real physical dangers. When confronted by a predator, there was no time for lengthy analysis. The body needed to respond immediately. This automatic survival response is known as the fight-or-flight response. Sometimes the body prepares to confront danger. Sometimes it prepares to escape. In modern life, however, the amygdala often reacts to psychological challenges in much the same way it once reacted to physical threats. A presentation, a job interview, a difficult conversation, speaking up in a meeting. Although none of these situations threaten your survival, your brain may respond as though they do. Sophia wasn't afraid because the promotion was dangerous. She was afraid because it represented uncertainty, responsibility, visibility, the possibility of failure. To her nervous system, unfamiliarity felt like risk. This experience becomes even stronger through fear conditioning. Fear conditioning occurs when the brain learns to associate certain situations with discomfort. Imagine giving a presentation that goes poorly. Your brain stores not only the memory, but also the emotions connected to it. The next time you stand before an audience, your nervous system remembers. It prepares for danger before anything has actually gone wrong. The same thing happens after criticism, rejection, embarrassment, or disappointment. Past emotional experiences quietly influence present reactions. The challenge is that the brain often overgeneralizes. One difficult experience becomes evidence that all similar experiences should be avoided. One failed business idea becomes, "I'm not entrepreneurial." One awkward conversation becomes, "I'm bad with people." One unsuccessful interview becomes, "I'm not leadership material." Fear narrows possibility, not because it predicts the future accurately, because it assumes yesterday will always repeat itself. For years, Sophia believed confidence would arrive first. Then she would take action. She waited. Months passed, then years. Confidence never appeared. Eventually, she noticed something unexpected. The people she admired most didn't seem fearless. They admitted feeling nervous before presentations. They questioned themselves before major decisions. They worried about making mistakes, yet they acted anyway. That observation changed everything. Perhaps confidence wasn't the cause of action. Perhaps action was the cause of confidence. This is where emotional regulation becomes essential. Emotional regulation does not mean eliminating fear. It means recognizing fear without allowing it to make every decision for you. Imagine standing beside a frightened child during a thunderstorm. You wouldn't tell the child, "Stop feeling afraid." You would acknowledge the fear while gently reminding them they were safe. You can learn to respond to your own emotions with the same wisdom. Fear is information, not instruction. It tells you that something feels significant. It does not automatically tell you to stop. Sophia decided to test this idea. Instead of applying for the senior position immediately, she volunteered to lead one important meeting. She was nervous. Her heart raced. Her voice shook during the first few minutes. Then something interesting happened. The meeting continued. People listened. Questions were answered. Problems were solved. She walked out feeling different. Not because fear had disappeared, because she had experienced something stronger. She had acted while afraid. That experience became evidence. The next opportunity felt slightly less intimidating. Then the next. Each courageous action taught her nervous system that discomfort was survivable. Eventually, she applied for the promotion she had once avoided. Whether she received it mattered less than something far more important. She had stopped allowing fear to decide the direction of her life. This is the hidden science of confidence. The amygdala learns from experience. Every time you avoid a challenge because of fear, your brain concludes, "Avoidance kept me safe." The fear becomes stronger. Every time you face a challenge despite fear, your brain receives new evidence. I was uncomfortable, and I survived. Gradually, the alarm becomes quieter. Not because life becomes less uncertain, because your brain learns that uncertainty is no longer synonymous with danger. This is why courage is so often misunderstood. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing what matters more than fear. It is raising your hand even when your voice shakes, submitting the application before you feel fully prepared, beginning the conversation you've been avoiding, taking the first step before seeing the entire path. Fear will always be part of a meaningful life. Growth guarantees it. The goal is not to remove fear. The goal is to stop treating fear as the final authority. Because on the other side of the situations that frighten you most often lies the person you are capable of becoming. Once you understand fear, you stop waiting for it to disappear. And that is the moment you begin building confidence, not through perfect certainty, but through courageous action, one step at a time. Chapter 5. The Confidence Loop. Emma used to believe she needed to feel confident before taking creative risks. If she could just eliminate her doubts, she thought, Then she would finally submit her ideas without hesitation, speak more boldly during client meetings, and stop second-guessing every design she created. So she waited. She read books about confidence. She watched motivational videos. She searched for the perfect mindset. Yet each new project brought the same familiar uncertainty. Maybe this isn't good enough. Perhaps I should spend another day improving it. What if they don't like it? The confidence she was waiting for never seemed to arrive. Then one conversation changed everything. An experienced designer she admired listened patiently as Emma described her struggles. When she finished, he smiled and asked, "How many projects have you delayed because you didn't feel confident?" Emma laughed. "Too many." He nodded. "Maybe you've been waiting for confidence to cause action, when it's actually action that creates confidence." That simple idea challenged everything she believed. Most people imagine confidence as the starting point. In reality, it is often the result. Psychologists describe this process through a principle known as behavioral activation. Behavioral activation is based on a simple but powerful observation. Waiting for the perfect emotional state before acting often keeps people stuck. Taking meaningful action, even when motivation or confidence is incomplete, creates new emotional experiences that gradually change how people think and feel. In other words, action doesn't simply reflect confidence. Action builds it. Think about learning any new skill. Whether it's driving, swimming, speaking another language, or playing an instrument, confidence rarely appears before the first attempt. The first attempts usually feel awkward. Mistakes are common. Progress seems slow. But every completed effort teaches the brain something valuable. I did something difficult. I survived. I improved. Those experiences accumulate. Confidence quietly grows in the background. Emma decided to test this idea. Instead of waiting until every design felt perfect, she gave herself a new rule. When a project met her professional standards, she would send it. No endless revisions, no searching for impossible perfection, just thoughtful work followed by decisive action. The first few projects felt uncomfortable. She noticed the familiar urge to keep editing, to delay, to question herself one last time. Instead, she pressed send. Every time she did, something interesting happened. Sometimes clients loved the work immediately. Sometimes they requested changes. Sometimes they suggested new ideas she hadn't considered. None of those outcomes destroyed her confidence. In fact, each completed project strengthened it. Why? Because confidence was no longer based on receiving perfect feedback. It was based on proving to herself that she could take action. This created a powerful feedback loop. A feedback loop occurs when one action influences the next. Emma completed a project. Completing the project increased her sense of competence. Greater competence made future action feel less intimidating. More action created even greater competence. The cycle repeated. Notice how different this loop is from the one created by self-doubt. Overthinking leads to avoidance. Avoidance reduces experience. Less experience weakens confidence. Lower confidence encourages even more avoidance. The cycle continues. Behavior works the same way in the opposite direction. Small actions create small successes. Small successes strengthen belief. Stronger belief encourages larger actions. The loop gradually transforms your identity. This is also how habit formation supports confidence. Earlier, you learned that habits shape behavior. Here, those habits begin shaping self-belief. Every courageous action becomes evidence. Every completed challenge becomes another vote for the person you are becoming. Emma no longer asked herself, "Do I feel confident enough?" She asked, "What's the next action I can take?" The difference seemed small. It changed everything. Her attention shifted away from emotions she couldn't fully control and toward behaviors she could. Some mornings she still doubted herself. She worked anyway. Some afternoons, she questioned whether a client would approve her designs. She submitted them anyway. Her confidence stopped depending on how she felt that day. It depended on what she consistently practiced. Over time, something even more valuable began developing: competence. Competence is not simply believing you can do something, it is the ability that comes from repeated experience. Every completed project sharpened Emma's judgment. Every client conversation improved her communication. Every challenge strengthened her creative skills. The more competent she became, the less her brain relied on fear to predict future outcomes. Real confidence has always been closely connected to competence, not perfect competence, growing competence. People often mistake confidence for positive thinking. Positive thinking can be helpful, but genuine confidence grows strongest when supported by real experience. You trust yourself because you've repeatedly shown yourself that you can learn, adapt, and improve, not because you've convinced yourself you'll never fail. Months later, Emma noticed that she was volunteering ideas during meetings without rehearsing them endlessly beforehand. She accepted constructive criticism without questioning her entire career. She experimented creatively instead of protecting herself from every possible mistake. The confidence she had searched for through endless thinking had quietly appeared through repeated action. That is the confidence loop. Action creates experience. Experience develops competence. Competence strengthens confidence. Confidence encourages greater action. The cycle continues. Every meaningful life is built this way, not through one dramatic breakthrough, but through countless ordinary moments where you choose movement over hesitation. Because confidence has never been something you discover hidden inside yourself. It is something you build every time you act, despite uncertainty. And as those repeated actions continue, they begin changing something even deeper than your behavior. They begin changing who you believe you are. Chapter 6. Rewriting your identity. Daniel used to introduce himself with quiet limitations, not out loud, but in the conversations he had with himself every single day. I'm just not a confident person. I'm not a natural leader. Other people are better at speaking than I am. He had repeated these thoughts for so many years that they no longer sounded like opinions. They sounded like facts. Without realizing it, Daniel had built an identity around his insecurity. Every decision passed through that identity first. When someone suggested he lead a project, his mind responded, "That's not who I am." When an opportunity required visibility, his first instinct was to step back. Not because he lacked ability, because his identity had already decided what kind of person he believed himself to be. This is one of the most powerful truths in psychology. People rarely behave in ways that consistently contradict their identity. You may force yourself to act differently for a day or two. You may feel motivated after reading an inspiring book or attending a seminar, but motivation fades. Identity remains. Imagine someone who believes, "I'm not the kind of person who exercises." They might successfully complete a workout today, perhaps even tomorrow, but sooner or later their behavior begins matching their identity again. Now, imagine someone who believes, "I'm someone who takes care of my health." Missing one workout doesn't threaten that identity. They simply return the next day because the behavior feels consistent with who they believe they are. Confidence works the same way. If your identity says, "I'm shy, I'm awkward, I'm always nervous, I'm just not confident," your brain naturally searches for evidence that confirms those beliefs. Every uncomfortable moment becomes proof. Every mistake strengthens the story. Every success is dismissed as luck. Psychologists describe this process through the concept of self-concept. Your self-concept is the collection of beliefs you hold about yourself. It influences what you notice, what you expect, and what you believe you deserve. In many ways, your self-concept becomes the invisible filter through which you experience the world. Daniel's self-concept had been shaped over many years. Childhood criticism, fear of failure, missed opportunities. Each experience quietly added another sentence to the story he told himself. Eventually, the story became stronger than reality. Even after successfully leading projects and receiving positive feedback, he continued thinking, "I'm not naturally confident." The evidence had changed. His identity had not. One afternoon, while reflecting on everything he had learned, Daniel noticed something surprising. He had spent years asking, "How can I become confident?" Perhaps he had been asking the wrong question. Instead, he asked, "Who am I becoming every time I choose courage instead of avoidance?" That question shifted his attention completely. Instead of trying to feel like a confident person, he began acting like someone committed to learning. He stopped saying, "I'm not confident," and started saying, "I'm someone who grows through experience." The change sounded small. Its psychological impact was enormous. This is where identity-based habits become so important. Every action you repeat becomes evidence for the identity you are building. Each time Daniel volunteered to lead a meeting, he cast another vote for the person he was becoming. Each difficult conversation strengthened that identity. Each challenge successfully navigated reinforced it. The purpose of those actions was no longer simply to complete a task. It was to become a different person. Notice the difference. Goals focus on outcomes. Identity focuses on becoming. A goal says, "I want to give one confident presentation." Identity says, "I am becoming someone who communicates with confidence." Goals can be achieved and forgotten. Identity continues influencing behavior long after individual goals have been completed. This transformation also explains the psychology of cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort we experience when our actions conflict with our beliefs. If Daniel truly believed he was incapable, yet repeatedly found himself leading successful projects, his brain faced two options: either dismiss the evidence or update his identity. At first, he tried dismissing it. That project was just luck. Anyone could have done that. But as more experiences accumulated, maintaining the old story became increasingly difficult. Eventually, the evidence became stronger than the belief. His identity began changing. Not because he repeated positive affirmations, because his actions repeatedly contradicted his old assumptions. This is how identity reinforcement works. Every behavior either strengthens the identity you want or reinforces the identity you hope to leave behind. When you avoid challenges, you strengthen avoidance. When you face challenges, you strengthen courage. When you keep promises to yourself, you strengthen trust. When you repeatedly act despite fear, you strengthen confidence. Identity is never built in one dramatic moment. It is built quietly through repetition. Months later, Daniel noticed something remarkable. He no longer spent much time wondering whether he was confident. The question had become less important. His attention had shifted toward learning, contributing, and growing. Confidence had become a natural consequence rather than a constant goal. That is often how lasting change feels. The new identity becomes so familiar that you stop noticing it. You simply live it. This is the hidden science behind enduring confidence. Behavior follows identity far more consistently than it follows motivation. Motivation inspires action. Identity sustains it. When you become the kind of person who believes growth is part of who you are, courage becomes easier to choose. Not because fear disappears, because your identity becomes stronger than your fear. Daniel didn't transform by convincing himself he was fearless. He transformed by becoming someone who trusted the learning process more than the need to appear perfect. That quiet shift changed every decision that followed. Because lasting confidence is never built by pretending to be someone else. It is built by rewriting the story of who you believe you are. And once that stronger identity begins taking root, it prepares you for something every confident person eventually encounters: life's inevitable setbacks. Chapter 7. Building Resilience After Failure. Few experiences challenge confidence more than failure. Not because failure is rare, because it feels personal. A project falls apart. A presentation goes badly. A business loses money. An interview ends with rejection. In moments like these, it is easy to believe that one disappointing outcome says something permanent about who you are. But it doesn't. Failure is an event. Identity is a choice. The difference between those two ideas determines whether setbacks become prisons or classrooms. Ryan discovered this during what he considered the worst presentation of his career. Months after accepting a leadership role, he was asked to present a proposal to senior executives. He prepared carefully. He practiced repeatedly. He knew the material well. Yet the moment he stood in front of the room, something unexpected happened. His mind went blank. He lost his place halfway through the presentation. A slide appeared out of order. He stumbled through several explanations and finished feeling embarrassed and disappointed. As he walked back to his desk, his inner critic immediately took control. "You weren't ready. Everyone saw you fail. You're not a leader after all." The words felt painfully convincing. For a brief moment, Ryan considered avoiding future presentations altogether. It would have been easy, safe, comfortable. But he remembered something that had quietly transformed many parts of his life. Confidence is not measured by how often you succeed. It is measured by what you do after you don't. That realization encouraged him to pause before judging himself. Instead of asking, "Why did I fail?" he asked, "What can this experience teach me?" That question marked the beginning of resilience. Earlier in this audiobook, you learned about the growth mindset, the belief that abilities develop through learning, practice, and experience rather than remaining fixed. Failure looks very different through that perspective. A fixed mindset says, "I failed because I'm not capable." A growth mindset says, "I failed because I still have something to learn." Notice what changes. The event stays the same. The meaning changes completely. Ryan reviewed a recording of his presentation, not to criticize himself, to learn. He noticed that he had rushed the opening because of nervousness. He realized he had relied too heavily on memorization instead of understanding the natural flow of his ideas. He recognized moments where pausing would have helped both him and his audience. None of these observations attacked his worth. They simply identified areas for improvement. This reflects another important psychological concept known as attribution theory. Attribution theory explores how people explain success and failure. Some people interpret setbacks as permanent reflections of who they are. "I'm just bad at public speaking." Others blame only external circumstances. The room was difficult. The audience wasn't paying attention. Neither explanation creates lasting growth. Resilient people take a more balanced approach. They accept responsibility for what they can improve while recognizing that one event never defines their identity. Ryan didn't pretend the presentation had gone well. It hadn't. But he also refused to let one difficult afternoon become the story of his future. Instead, he identified specific skills to strengthen. He practiced speaking without memorizing every sentence. He learned breathing techniques to calm his nervous system. He asked experienced colleagues for feedback instead of hiding from them. Each adjustment made the next presentation slightly easier. That is how confidence grows after failure. Not through denial, through adaptation. This process also builds emotional resilience. Emotional resilience is not the ability to avoid disappointment. It is the ability to experience disappointment without becoming trapped by it. Resilient people still feel embarrassed, they still feel discouraged, they still question themselves. The difference is that they recover. They allow difficult emotions to exist without allowing those emotions to define their future decisions. Ryan gave another presentation 6 weeks later. It wasn't perfect. He still felt nervous. He occasionally searched for the right words, but he stayed present. He recovered smoothly when small mistakes occurred. Most importantly, he no longer viewed imperfection as disaster. He viewed it as part of learning. That shift reflected another strength you've encountered throughout this audiobook: psychological flexibility. Psychological flexibility is the ability to adjust without abandoning yourself. Rigid thinking says, "One failure means I should stop." Flexible thinking says, "One failure means I should learn differently." Rigid thinking protects the ego. Flexible thinking develops the person. Over time, Ryan noticed something remarkable. His confidence became less dependent on flawless performance. It became rooted in something much stronger: trust. Not trust that everything would always go well. Trust that whatever happened, he could learn, recover, and continue. That kind of confidence cannot be built through success alone. It is earned by surviving setbacks that once seemed unbearable. Think about the most capable people you admire. Very few reach their goals without experiencing failure. What separates them is rarely talent alone. It is their willingness to remain students when life becomes difficult. Failure stops being a verdict. It becomes feedback. This is one of the greatest psychological transformations available to you. When something goes wrong, stop asking, "What does this say about me?" Instead ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" The first question creates shame. The second creates growth. Confidence grows strongest when it survives disappointment, because every recovery becomes evidence. Evidence that you are adaptable, capable, resilient. Ryan eventually looked back on that failed presentation with gratitude, not because he enjoyed it, because it taught him something success never could. His confidence did not come from always performing well. It came from discovering that one difficult moment could never define his potential. Failure had become information, not identity. And once resilience becomes part of your character, another fascinating change begins to happen. Confidence no longer transforms only the way you see yourself. It also changes the way the world begins responding to you. Chapter 8. The Psychology of Presence. Imagine meeting two people who say exactly the same words. The first avoids eye contact, speaks quietly, apologizes before expressing every opinion, and constantly looks around the room as though waiting for someone else to approve of what they are saying. The second speaks calmly, listens carefully, maintains comfortable eye contact, and pauses before responding instead of rushing to fill every silence. The message is identical. The impression is completely different. Long before people evaluate your ideas, they begin responding to your presence. This is not because appearance matters more than substance. It is because human beings naturally communicate through far more than words. Every conversation includes posture, facial expressions, tone of voice, gestures, pace, and attention. Together, these signals quietly influence how others perceive confidence, trustworthiness, and credibility. Sophia discovered this without changing a single qualification on her resume. After months of building self-trust and learning to manage fear, she finally applied for the leadership position she had once avoided. Before the interview, however, she noticed something interesting. Her greatest obstacle was no longer her knowledge. It was the way she physically carried herself. Whenever she felt nervous, her shoulders tightened. She looked at the floor while speaking. She rushed through sentences. She smiled apologetically after sharing perfectly reasonable ideas. Without realizing it, her body was communicating uncertainty before she had finished introducing herself. Many people assume confidence exists only in the mind. Modern psychology suggests something more fascinating. The relationship works in both directions. Your thoughts influence your body. Your body also influences your thoughts. This principle is often described as embodied cognition. Embodied cognition proposes that the mind and body constantly influence one another. Think about what naturally happens when you feel discouraged. Your shoulders drop, your breathing becomes shallower, your movements slow down. Now imagine intentionally standing upright, breathing deeply, and walking with steady purpose. Your problems may not disappear, yet your emotional experience often changes. The body sends information back to the brain. Posture is not pretending. It is part of the conversation your nervous system is constantly having with itself. Sophia decided to experiment with this idea. She didn't try to become someone else. She simply paid attention to behaviors she had never consciously noticed before. Before meetings, she slowed her breathing. She relaxed her shoulders. Instead of looking down while speaking, she looked at the person she was addressing. She stopped apologizing for every suggestion. She allowed brief moments of silence rather than rushing to fill them with nervous explanations. At first, these changes felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. But unfamiliar does not mean unnatural. It often means you're practicing something new. 1 week later, a colleague said something unexpected. "You seem different lately." Sophia smiled. "Different how?" "You seem calmer," he replied. "More confident." The surprising part was that Sophia still felt nervous inside. What had changed was not the complete absence of anxiety. It was the consistency of her behavior. Psychologists have long understood the importance of nonverbal communication. Research suggests that people form impressions remarkably quickly, often before lengthy conversations even begin. They notice whether someone appears attentive, whether they seem comfortable with themselves, whether their actions match their words. None of this requires perfection. People are not searching for flawless performers. They are searching for authenticity, someone who speaks thoughtfully, listens carefully, responds deliberately. These quiet behaviors communicate confidence far more effectively than trying to appear impressive. Another fascinating psychological process is known as emotional contagion. Emotions are surprisingly contagious. Spend time around someone who remains calm during pressure, and your own nervous system often begins settling. Spend time around someone who is visibly anxious, and you may notice your own tension increasing. Human beings continuously influence one another through subtle emotional signals. This means your presence affects more than your own experience. It influences the emotional environment around you. When Sophia entered meetings with greater composure, people responded differently. Conversations became calmer. Others listened more carefully. Her confidence invited confidence in return. Not because she demanded attention, because she created an atmosphere that encouraged trust. This changed the way she viewed communication. She stopped asking, "How can I sound more confident?" Instead, she asked, "How can I become fully present with the person in front of me?" That shift removed enormous pressure. Her attention moved away from monitoring herself and toward genuinely engaging with others. Ironically, that made her appear even more confident. Presence has always been more persuasive than performance. People rarely remember every word you say. They remember how you made them feel. Did they feel heard, respected, understood, safe? Confident people are not constantly trying to prove themselves. They are paying attention to the conversation instead of their own insecurities. This is why genuine confidence often appears quiet. It does not need to dominate every discussion. It does not need to have every answer. It does not seek constant validation. It simply shows up with steadiness, curiosity, and intention. Sophia eventually realized that confidence had never been hidden inside the perfect sentence. It was expressed through countless small behaviors repeated every day. Standing with openness instead of tension. Listening instead of rehearsing responses. Speaking clearly instead of apologetically. Making eye contact instead of looking away. None of these actions required extraordinary talent. They required awareness, then practice. Over time, those behaviors became natural, not because Sophia forced them, because they reflected the person she was becoming. This is one of the most encouraging truths about confidence. You don't need perfect words to leave a powerful impression. You need consistent behaviors that reflect genuine self-trust. People notice how you carry yourself long before they evaluate everything you say. And as those behaviors become part of your daily life, something even deeper begins to happen. Confidence is no longer simply an emotion you hope to feel. It becomes part of your identity. Chapter 9. Becoming your own source of validation. Imagine carrying a mirror everywhere you go. Not to see your reflection, but to ask everyone around you who you are. Every compliment makes you feel valuable. Every criticism makes you question yourself. Every moment of approval lifts your confidence. Every moment of disapproval takes it away again. Soon your sense of worth no longer belongs to you. It belongs to whoever happens to be looking into the mirror. Many people live this way without realizing it. They measure their value through likes, praise, promotions, grades, compliments, or other people's opinions. While appreciation can be encouraging, it becomes exhausting when your confidence depends on receiving it. Because external approval is unpredictable. Some people will understand you, others won't. Some will celebrate your growth, others may feel threatened by it. If your confidence rises and falls with every opinion, your emotional life becomes impossible to stabilize. Emma understood this better than anyone. For years, every creative project felt like a test of her worth. If a client loved her work, she felt confident. If someone requested revisions, she quietly wondered whether she had chosen the wrong career. Constructive feedback became personal. Compliments became temporary relief. Her confidence wasn't built on her own judgment. It depended on someone else's. One afternoon, after finishing a challenging design project, she noticed something unusual. Before opening the client's email, she asked herself, "Do I believe I did thoughtful, honest work?" The answer was yes. For the first time, she realized that her opinion of her effort mattered before anyone else's response. That moment became the beginning of a profound shift. Psychologists describe this perspective as an internal locus of control. People with an internal locus of control believe their lives are primarily shaped by their own choices, effort, learning, and responses. People with a more external locus of control tend to believe their well-being depends largely on circumstances, luck, or other people's judgments. Neither perspective is absolute. Life always includes factors beyond your control. But confident people gradually learn to anchor their self-worth in what they can influence rather than in what they cannot. Emma couldn't control every client's preferences. She couldn't control whether everyone appreciated her style. She couldn't control every opinion. She could control the quality of her preparation, her willingness to learn, her professionalism, her integrity. That realization gave her something she had rarely experienced before: stability. Another essential part of lasting confidence is self-compassion. Many people believe confidence grows by becoming harder on themselves. They think constant self-criticism will motivate improvement. Research suggests the opposite. People who treat themselves with reasonable kindness after mistakes are often more resilient, more persistent, and more willing to learn than those who attack themselves relentlessly. Self-compassion is not lowering your standards. It is refusing to confuse a disappointing outcome with your value as a human being. Imagine a close friend making a mistake at work. You probably wouldn't say, "You're a failure." You would likely remind them that everyone makes mistakes, help them learn from the experience, and encourage them to keep going. The question is simple. Why should you deserve less understanding than someone you care about? Emma began changing the way she spoke to herself. When projects didn't go as planned, she stopped asking, "What's wrong with me?" Instead, she asked, "What can I improve next time?" The difference was subtle. The emotional impact was enormous. Her inner voice slowly became less like a harsh judge and more like a wise coach. That shift also strengthened her intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation comes from doing something because it aligns with your values, curiosity, or sense of purpose, not because it earns approval. When Emma first became a designer, she loved creating. She enjoyed solving problems visually. She found satisfaction in helping people communicate ideas more clearly. Over time, however, she had become more focused on pleasing others than enjoying the work itself. By reconnecting with her original purpose, she rediscovered something deeper than praise. She rediscovered meaning. Confidence built on meaning lasts longer than confidence built on applause, because applause eventually ends, purpose remains. Gradually, Emma noticed another unexpected change. She stopped constantly asking, "Do people like my work?" and started asking, "Am I proud of the effort, honesty, and growth behind it?" Those questions produced very different lives. The first handed her confidence to strangers. The second returned it to her. This is the quiet power of self-respect. Self-respect does not require universal approval. It requires living in alignment with your own values. Some people will still misunderstand you. Some opportunities will still not work out. Some criticism will still be unfair. None of those experiences need to determine your worth. Because your value is no longer borrowed from someone else's opinion. It is built through the promises you keep to yourself, the standards you choose to uphold, and the character you practice every day. That kind of confidence cannot be taken away by one difficult conversation or one disappointing outcome. It belongs to you. And once you stop chasing constant approval, something remarkable begins to happen. Your decisions become clearer, because they are guided less by the fear of disappointing others and more by the life you genuinely want to create. Chapter 10. Making Bold Decisions. Imagine standing at the edge of a diving board. You know the water is safe. You've watched countless other people jump. You understand exactly what to do. Yet you remain standing there, waiting for the moment when all uncertainty disappears. It never does. Eventually, you realize something important. The confidence to jump will probably not arrive before the jump. It will be created because of it. Life presents moments like this more often than we realize. Accepting a new job, starting a business, ending an unhealthy relationship, moving to a different city, sharing an idea that matters. Every meaningful decision asks the same question. Will you keep preparing, or will you begin? Daniel had spent years believing that preparation alone would eventually produce certainty. Earlier in this audiobook, you saw how perfectionism and self-doubt kept him waiting for the ideal moment to launch his business. His plans became more detailed, his research became more extensive, his knowledge continued growing, his business remained an idea. One evening, Daniel opened a notebook filled with plans he had written over the past 4 years. The pages were full of thoughtful strategies, financial projections, branding ideas, and marketing plans. As he turned each page, he noticed something that surprised him. The quality of his plans had improved dramatically. His life had not. He had mistaken preparation for progress. Many people fall into this trap because preparation feels productive. It creates the comforting sense that you're moving forward. Sometimes you are. But there comes a point when additional planning becomes another form of avoidance. Psychologists often refer to this as analysis paralysis. Analysis paralysis occurs when the search for the perfect decision becomes so overwhelming that no decision is made at all. Ironically, the desire to avoid mistakes creates the biggest mistake of all. Nothing changes. The future remains postponed. Potential remains unrealized. Growth never begins. Daniel recognized this pattern in himself. He wasn't lacking information. He was lacking commitment. The question was no longer, do I know enough? It had become, am I willing to move forward before knowing everything? That question shifted his attention away from certainty and toward courage. Good decision-making has never required perfect information. It requires enough information to make a thoughtful choice, followed by the willingness to adapt as reality unfolds. This is true in business, relationships, careers, and nearly every meaningful part of life. Waiting until every variable is known usually means waiting forever. Another important part of confidence is developing a healthy risk tolerance. Risk tolerance does not mean becoming reckless. It means accepting that uncertainty is part of every worthwhile opportunity. There is risk in starting a business. There is also risk in never pursuing the work that matters to you. There is risk in changing careers. There is also risk in remaining somewhere that no longer allows you to grow. Every decision carries uncertainty. Confident people are not those who eliminate risk. They are those who learn to choose meaningful risks over comfortable stagnation. Daniel finally reached a point where one realization became impossible to ignore. The pain of staying the same had become greater than the fear of beginning. The following Monday morning, he registered his business. The process took less than an hour. Something he had delayed for years was completed before lunchtime. Did everything suddenly become easy? Of course not. New challenges appeared almost immediately. Unexpected expenses, marketing problems, difficult customers, moments of doubt. But none of those challenges compared to the burden of endless waiting. For the first time, Daniel felt something deeper than temporary excitement. He felt self-trust. Self-trust is not believing that every decision will work perfectly. It is believing that whatever happens, you will respond with honesty, adaptability, and persistence. That trust changes the way you approach uncertainty. Instead of asking, "What if I choose wrong?" you begin asking, "If this doesn't go as planned, do I trust myself to learn?" That question removes enormous pressure because suddenly your future no longer depends on making flawless decisions. It depends on becoming someone who can handle imperfect outcomes. Daniel discovered that decisive people are not necessarily smarter than everyone else, nor are they fearless. They simply understand that clarity often comes after movement rather than before it. Each decision teaches something impossible to learn through imagination alone. Each experience reveals information that planning could never provide. Each action strengthens confidence because it replaces speculation with reality. Months after launching his business, Daniel looked back at the years he had spent waiting. He realized that the greatest obstacle had never been competition, funding, or timing. It had been believing that confidence should exist before action. Now he understood the truth. Confidence grows every time you keep a promise to yourself. Every time you make a thoughtful decision instead of postponing it. Every time you move despite uncertainty. Progress belongs to those who decide. Not because every decision is perfect, because every decision creates an opportunity to learn, adapt, and grow. This is the quiet power of decisive action. It transforms ideas into experience, potential into progress, hope into reality. And over time, those repeated decisions create something far greater than successful outcomes. They create a confident life, because confident decisions, repeated consistently, become the foundation of the person you are continually becoming. Chapter 11. Living Beyond Fear. Imagine standing in a small circle drawn on the ground. Inside the circle, everything feels familiar. The conversations are predictable, the routines are comfortable, the risks are small. Nothing unexpected happens. At first, the circle feels safe. But after a while, something begins to change. The circle no longer feels like protection. It begins to feel like a prison. This is the hidden cost of the comfort zone. It protects you from discomfort. But it also protects you from growth. Most people assume confidence comes from finding a place where fear no longer exists. In reality, confidence grows by repeatedly discovering that fear does not have the final word. Ryan understood this better than anyone. Months earlier, he had struggled to speak during meetings, hesitated before every important decision, and questioned whether he belonged in leadership at all. Each challenge felt overwhelming because his world had become carefully organized around avoiding discomfort. He avoided presentations whenever possible. He let others lead difficult conversations. He stayed silent when he had valuable ideas. The strategy worked. He experienced less anxiety. He also experienced less growth. The smaller his comfort zone became, the more frightening ordinary challenges started to feel. This reflects an important psychological principle, often described as comfort zone theory. The comfort zone is not simply a place where you feel relaxed. It is a collection of experiences your brain has labeled as familiar and predictable. Outside that boundary, uncertainty increases. So does discomfort. Many people interpret that discomfort as evidence that they should turn back. The brain interprets unfamiliarity as potential danger. But unfamiliarity and danger are not the same thing. This is why psychologists have long used a method known as exposure therapy to help people overcome fears. Exposure therapy does not ask someone to eliminate fear through positive thinking alone. Instead, it encourages gradual, repeated experiences with the situations they fear. Each successful exposure teaches the brain something new. I was uncomfortable, but I was safe. Over time, the nervous system updates its expectations. The alarm grows quieter, confidence grows stronger. Ryan unknowingly began following this exact process. He didn't decide to become fearless overnight. Instead, he chose one uncomfortable challenge at a time. First, he volunteered to share one idea during weekly meetings. Then he agreed to lead a short presentation. Later, he accepted responsibility for managing a larger project. Each step stretched his comfort zone just enough to encourage growth without overwhelming him completely. Some days felt easier than others. There were moments when his voice still trembled, moments when he questioned himself, moments when he wondered whether the old version of himself had been right all along. But something remarkable kept happening. Every challenge that once felt impossible gradually became familiar. The presentation that once seemed terrifying eventually became routine. The difficult conversation became manageable. The leadership role became part of everyday life. His abilities had certainly improved. More importantly, his brain had learned. This process is known as adaptive learning. Adaptive learning occurs when experience reshapes your expectations. The brain stops relying only on old predictions and begins updating itself through new evidence. Every courageous action becomes another lesson. Perhaps I'm capable of more than I believed. Notice that confidence doesn't suddenly appear after one success. It expands gradually. Just as muscles grow through repeated effort, confidence grows through repeated exposure to manageable challenges. Each experience stretches your sense of what is possible. Each recovery strengthens your trust in yourself. Eventually, what once felt extraordinary becomes ordinary. This is also how habit expansion works. Every time you consistently choose courage over avoidance, your normal way of living quietly changes. The comfort zone expands. The situations that once demanded enormous bravery become part of your everyday life. Then new opportunities appear beyond the newly expanded boundary. Growth becomes a lifelong process rather than a single achievement. Ryan eventually looked back on the person he had been just a year earlier. He remembered declining opportunities because they felt intimidating. He remembered believing confident people were simply different. Now he understood something much more hopeful. Confidence had never belonged to a special group of people. It belonged to those willing to become beginners repeatedly. Those willing to feel awkward while learning. Those willing to remain uncomfortable long enough for growth to occur. This realization transformed the way he viewed fear. Instead of asking, "How can I avoid feeling uncomfortable?" he began asking, "What opportunity is this discomfort inviting me toward?" That single question changed everything. Discomfort stopped being a warning sign. It became evidence that he was expanding into a larger life. This is the paradox of confidence. The more consistently you leave your comfort zone, the more comfortable you become with growth itself. Fear still appears, but it no longer decides your direction. Ryan discovered that the goal had never been to eliminate fear. The goal was to stop allowing fear to determine the size of his future. Every challenge accepted became another reminder that he was capable of adapting. Every uncomfortable experience became another investment in the person he was becoming. Growth always begins where comfort ends, not because discomfort is enjoyable, because it is where the brain discovers new possibilities. It is where old limitations begin to fade. It is where confidence quietly expands. And as that confidence continues growing, one final transformation begins to emerge. The destination is no longer becoming someone who never feels afraid. It is becoming someone who keeps moving forward anyway. Someone who is no longer waiting for permission. Someone who has become truly unstoppable. Chapter 12. The Identity of a Confident Person. Think back to the person you were at the beginning of this audiobook. Perhaps you hesitated before speaking up. Perhaps you questioned your abilities more often than you acknowledged them. Perhaps you believed confidence belonged to people who were naturally charismatic, fearless, or gifted with something you simply didn't have. Now pause for a moment. Not to ask whether every fear has disappeared, but to ask a more meaningful question. Who are you becoming? That question captures the heart of lasting confidence. Throughout this journey, you've discovered that confidence is not an emotion you magically wake up with one morning. It isn't a personality trait reserved for a fortunate few, nor is it something that appears after life becomes easy. Confidence is an identity built through repeated choices, every time you act despite fear, every time you recover after failure, every time you keep a promise to yourself, every time you choose growth over comfort. You cast another vote for the person you are becoming. That is how transformation quietly takes place. Psychologists often describe this as identity transformation. Real change lasts when it reaches the level of identity. You can temporarily change your behavior through motivation. You can temporarily change your attitude through inspiration. But lasting change happens when your actions consistently reinforce a new belief about who you are. Instead of saying, "I'm trying to become confident," you begin saying, "I'm someone who faces challenges with courage and learns from experience." That subtle shift changes thousands of future decisions, because people naturally act in ways that align with the identity they believe they possess. Think about Emma. At the beginning of this audiobook, she questioned every creative decision she made. Praise from clients rarely reached her because self-doubt filtered every compliment through old insecurities. Today, she still values feedback. She still looks for ways to improve, but she no longer measures her worth by other people's opinions. Her confidence comes from knowing she approaches her work with integrity, curiosity, and consistent effort. She trusts herself more than she fears criticism. Daniel's transformation followed a different path. He spent years believing confidence belonged to people who never made mistakes. Perfection became his prison. Eventually, he discovered that growth mattered more than flawless performance. By repeatedly choosing action over hesitation, he rewrote the story he told himself. He stopped identifying as someone who lacked confidence and began identifying as someone who learns through experience. That identity changed not only his business, but the way he approached every opportunity life offered. Ryan once believed failure proved he wasn't capable. Every setback became a reason to retreat. Today, setbacks still happen, but they no longer define him. He understands that resilience is built through recovery, not perfection. His confidence rests on something much stronger than success. It rests on the knowledge that whatever challenge appears, he can learn, adapt, and continue moving forward. Sophia's greatest struggle had always been uncertainty. She searched for guarantees before making important decisions and waited for fear to disappear before taking meaningful action. Now she understands that certainty was never the destination. Self-trust was. She no longer tries to control every outcome. Instead, she trusts herself to respond wisely to whatever life brings. Her confidence has made her calmer, more present, and more willing to embrace opportunities she once avoided. Although their stories were different, they all discovered the same truth. Life did not suddenly become easier. People still disagreed with them. Unexpected problems still appeared. Mistakes still happened. Fear still visited from time to time. What changed was not the world around them. It was the person responding to that world. That is the essence of self-mastery. Self-mastery is not controlling everything outside yourself. It is learning to lead yourself with wisdom, discipline, and courage, regardless of circumstances. It means your values become stronger than your fears. Your purpose becomes stronger than your excuses. Your identity becomes stronger than your doubts. This transformation never truly ends. Confidence is not a finish line you cross once. It is a lifelong practice. Every new challenge invites another opportunity to grow. Every unfamiliar situation asks you to trust yourself again. Every season of life offers another chance to strengthen the identity you've been building. This is where psychological flexibility becomes one of your greatest strengths. The confident person is not rigid. They adapt. They remain curious. They continue learning. They accept that growth requires change, and they welcome that change instead of resisting it. They understand that confidence is not about knowing every answer. It is about believing they can find the next one. As you reach the end of this chapter, remember the lesson that has quietly guided every page of this audiobook. Confidence is never the result of one extraordinary moment. It is the result of countless ordinary choices made with extraordinary consistency. Each courageous conversation, each difficult decision, each lesson learned after failure, each promise kept to yourself. Together, they create the person you become. Your journey began with one simple question: can confidence really be learned? Now you know the answer. Confidence was never something waiting for you somewhere in the future. It has been growing within you every time you chose action over hesitation, learning over perfection, and courage over comfort. The person you are becoming has been there all along. You simply gave that person permission to step forward. As you reach the end of this audiobook, take a moment to look back at where your journey began. It didn't begin with courage. It didn't begin with certainty. It began with questions. Questions about your abilities. Questions about your future. Questions shaped by fear, hesitation, and self-doubt. Perhaps, like Emma, you questioned your own talent despite clear evidence of your abilities. Perhaps, like Daniel, you waited for perfection before taking action. Perhaps, like Ryan, you allowed past failures to predict your future. Or perhaps, like Sophia, you believed confidence would arrive only after fear disappeared. Now you know something different. Confidence is not an inborn gift. It is not reserved for the naturally charismatic, fearless, or extroverted. Science tells us that confidence is built through the remarkable adaptability of the human brain. Every courageous action strengthens new neural pathways. Every challenge overcome increases self-efficacy. Every habit repeated reinforces a stronger identity. Every decision made despite uncertainty teaches your mind that you are more capable than you once believed. In other words, confidence is not something you inherit. It is something you practice. Throughout this audiobook, you've discovered that lasting confidence grows from the inside out. It begins by challenging limiting beliefs, understanding fear instead of obeying it, replacing perfectionism with progress, trusting yourself through uncertainty, learning from failure, and choosing actions that reflect the person you want to become. Most importantly, you've learned that confidence is not the absence of fear. Fear will still visit. Self-doubt may still whisper. Life will continue presenting uncertainty, setbacks, and moments that test your resolve. The difference is that those experiences no longer have to decide your future. You do. Every day offers another opportunity to strengthen your confidence. Every difficult conversation, every bold decision, every promise you keep to yourself, every small action that aligns with your values becomes another piece of evidence that you are becoming stronger. Never underestimate the power of consistent practice. Extraordinary confidence is rarely built through extraordinary moments. It is built through ordinary moments repeated with extraordinary intention. So as you leave this audiobook, don't wait for the day you finally feel confident. Create it. Speak even when your voice shakes. Begin before you feel completely ready. Learn from every setback. Trust yourself a little more than you trusted your fears yesterday. Because confidence has never been hiding somewhere, waiting to be discovered. It is built one decision, one habit, one challenge, and one courageous action at a time. And with every step you choose to take, you become living proof that confidence isn't something you find. It's someone you become.